Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Council Chambers on this beautiful May 24th day. As you can see, that I'm wearing shades again today, and it's not because it's really bright outside, it's because my eyes are dilated. Had another test with my eyes to make sure that when they zapped them, to make sure they stopped the tearing of my retina, and I have to report it's doing well. It's healing, and I'll be back to normal in a few more days. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can tell, we're all wearing Oilers jerseys tonight. I think everybody chose the right team to cheer for tonight. Just to let you know that the game starts at 7:30. Deputy Mayor, if the meeting goes a little bit longer than 7:05, I think I'm coming down with COVID, so you might have to take over at 7:05 if we're still meeting at that time.
Happy to do that for you.
Members of Council, there's an agenda. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council adopt the May 24th, 2022 regular council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you. Administration, anything to add?
No, Your Worship, not at this time.
Okay. Members of Council, call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. Public input session. This is the time that we allow residents to address council on anything that's not on the current agenda. Administration, has anybody registered?
Your Worship, no one is registered.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anybody in the gallery that would like to speak to council on anything that's not on the council agenda? Okay, so nobody wants to speak in chambers. I'll move forward. There are no statutory public hearings today, so moving on to the adoption of council minutes of the RCM of May 9th. Councillor Meyer, please.
Yes, thank you. The Town Council approved the regular council meeting minutes of May 9th, 2022 as presented.
Okay. Members of Council, you had a chance to read it. Any errors or omissions? Okay. See none. Call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Move on to number 7, council boards. Councillor Loyens, please.
Town Council received the Tri-Municipal Leisure Center Facility Corporation Board minutes for March 10, 2022 and April 21st, 2022 for information.
Okay. Thank you. Members of Council, any questions or comments regarding those minutes that we've read? I believe our representative is not here, so any questions can be directed a little bit later to the representative through email. Okay. See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Moving on to number 8, bylaws. First one's 8.1, the Brickyard ASP amendment. Go ahead, administration.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. We're here to discuss the first reading of Bylaw 2659, Development and Planning 22, which is an area structure plan amendment to facilitate Stage 5 of the Brickyard development. So the area structure plan is the plan which would be amended with this bylaw. This is a plan at the neighborhood level which designates land uses and servicing and staging for development. So the area being changed is some medium density land use to be relocated along collector roads, and in addition to being relocated to be more adjacent to services, particularly parks and open space, and the future school site across Brickyard Drive. So this is the current concept plan being changed to this proposed concept plan, which shows relocation of some of that medium density to be more along the collector roadway. Additionally, there is also a temporary storm facility which has been incorporated into this design, which would allow for the extension and development of Brickyard Drive. Additionally, Figure 10 has been amended to reflect that change for Stage 1 and the development which is planned for this year. So next steps after meeting tonight, provided council gives first reading and acknowledges that we can proceed, we would advertise for public hearing, tentatively scheduled currently for June 27th. And that's all.
Thank you. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding on that presentation? Councilor Meyer?
Thank you. If I could just direct everyone to page 34, and it's the map regarding the stormwater flow. In the upper right corner of the area structure plan in question, just before, what is that, 50th Avenue that comes into Brickyard before it hits Brickyard Drive, there is an arrow there that I think those little tuning fork shaped, actually I suppose that should be my first question. The tuning shaped diagram, is that represents inflows, outlets? What exactly does that describe? And then if somebody could explain to me what the what that diagram is describing in the upper left corner. It looks like it's supposed to drain into a green space, public utility lot just across the street from 50th, north of it.
Your Worship, Councillor Meyer, the Little Fork, I believe, is intended to be an arrow showing an outlet to a small stormwater management area. If you drive down 50th Avenue, are we talking about the north corner here? The light green on the map?
Yeah.
So the light green represents an area of utility, a public utility lot generally. And that little outlet, that little pitchfork, if you want to call it that, is just indicating that it drains into the road right of way. And then the arrows continue to the west, showing that the drainage from there is towards the west there. My understanding is that most of the Old Town area actually drains into this area, and there's a sequence of some stormwater that is retained within there, and then it goes into the larger pond that currently exists, where there's, say, 4 pitchforks kind of coming around there. And then it would drain towards the northwest from there, and then out, kind of indicated a little dotted line that goes north-south from there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else, members of council, for questions of clarity? Can administration go back a couple slides, please? Right there. And it says, you have a circle there that says area being changed, but I believe also the southern portion of the Brickyard area structure plan here is also being changed as well.
Yes, Your Worship, you're correct. So the current subdivision which is planned for this year is reflected in that area, which is highlighted, though you are correct. There has been changes to the land use concept further south on the map, as you described. In future presentations, we'll make sure it's clearly articulated which areas are being changed.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate that, because when I saw that, I read through the whole package twice, and it looked like it changed more than just that area that where it was highlighted.
Yes, Your Worship, you are correct. The intent was to reflect which area was currently planned for development this year, and also highlight which areas were changed. That will be reflected.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, any other questions for clarity and understanding? Okay, another question for administration. So looking at the same map there, there is proposed temporary storm management pond on the high density site. So in terms of the phases of development after phase 1, how long will that storm management facility be there until the permanent one gets built and that storm facility gets moved over?
Your Worship, the intention is that it would be an interim storm pond to support the next phase, which is stage 5. Once stage 5 is done and they want to move on to the phase after that, again, this would be based upon the developer's timetable. We're expecting phase 5 this year, and that probably within a couple of years here, we would have it moved on so that the ultimate storm pond would be built in a couple of years here, the intent. And at that time, the interim storm pond would revert back to just undeveloped land.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions for clear and understanding? Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate that this slide is up. I just have a question around some of the allocation to parks and green spaces with the municipal reserve allocation there that if I'm understanding correctly, was moved just to the east side of Brickyard Drive. That green strip there, just inside the dotted line, is the piece that's being added as municipal reserve. Is that correct? Sorry, I just want to make sure.
Through your worship to Councillor Anderson, somewhat.
Okay.
Technically, it's an area that's not actually municipal reserve. That's a subdivision designation, but in terms of the land, the town does have all of the green space to the east of Brickyard Drive, noting that the southern area has been provided to the Parkland School Division for Stony Plain Central.
Perfect, thank you for that. And so my question then, when I went back to the Brickyard ASP and kind of read through the whole thing, was specifically looking for the allocation of parks and open spaces. And what I found was that area just to the east that we were just speaking about, the area around the ultimate storm pond, I think we called it, in the northwest. And then an area again across the road to the south. Has there been any conversation or intention about providing additional green space or open space or park space within that residential area itself?
Through your worship to Councillor Anderson, my recollection is that there's a 9% allocation of green space or MR in the plan area right now. Now, just if you notice where the temporary storm pond is, there's a green east-west strip there. That area has been subsequently replanned, if you would, for drainage purposes. And any of the preliminary planning that has taken place actually shows that as a public utility lot. So there is additional deficit in the plan area. However, this is one of the things that administration will be working with the developer to determine where that additional MR space would be allocated, likely within some of the yellow or low density areas as indicated on the map.
Okay.
Accordingly.
Sure, and I appreciate that. And so just a little bit of commentary with the conversation around the South Park Drive extension, the Silverstone neighborhood and that sort of thing, where we're talking about now infilling some recreation space into areas that are already partially developed. I think it's just prudent that when we're looking at a plan at this stage that we start to take that into consideration where that allocation is going to be. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Any other questions for clarity? See none. Councilor Anderson, I'll make you, ask you to make the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Town Council give first reading to Bylaw 2659/DNP/22 to amend the Brickyard at Old Town Area Structure Plan and authorize administration to proceed with newspaper advertising and notification of a public hearing to be held on June 13th, 2022 for Bylaw 2659/DNP/22.
Thank you. Members of Council, so the motion's on the floor. So again, this is to approve first reading and then to authorize administration to, again, proceed with advertising so we can have a public hearing regarding the proposed area structure plan changes. I'll open the floor. Any questions, comments from the debate? Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a general comment, and actually it's a very positive one. In reviewing the package, it was great to see the presentation that was done by Prism Engineering for the two open houses, as well as to see the included feedback information that they received from the residents. So just again, a good job to them for making sure that all those documents were included in here, that we got to visualize what the community was shown, and so that we get a good understanding as to what the feedback they received on their plan was. So just those comments, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions, comments, debate? Councilor Meyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you to administration, I'm just curious if the nature of a temporary storm pond makes the overall stormwater management for the area less efficient or less effective as it could be. I'm just thinking back to my time during the campaign, speaking with a number of residents in the area, and I see it also reflected in some of the comments regarding stormwater being at capacity. I'm not sure how true that is, but I do know, like I say, speaking with residents in the area, that they do have a number of challenges with the drainage, and I specifically referenced that one interesting little arrow earlier because I know a lot of the residents along that road that back onto 50th have issues. So I'm just curious if a temporary storm pond makes an effect on any of that.
Through your worship, to Councillor Meyer, thank you for the question. In terms of the drainage, we've been working very closely with the developer's engineer to address those concerns. Those are concerns that the town has brought up directly with their engineers as well. We're working with them to ensure that the drainage is sufficient for its intended use in this temporary nature, to not cause any nuisance water or other issues that could be exacerbated from this proposed plan.
Thank you. Councilor Meyer, anything else?
No, thank you.
Then I'll just add on to that question with what Councilor Meyer asked. Definitely talking to residents in that area that actually back right against the R8 site. Over the last few years, during the spring melt when there has been extra moisture, those lots in the back have been seeing water in their backyards. So with a temporary storm pond, help alleviate some of that until the full blown one is built in that northwest corner.
Your worship, just some, if you can offer me some clarity. Your observation from residents is that there is existing stormwater. They're seeing some water drainage in the back of their lots right now.
You go back to the slide. Yes, go back there. So with the current, where it is right now, so the town manager and I have been back to these lots back here that have recently been completed because through the melts, not this year, but about 3 years ago, there was tons of water back here and it filled up half the backyards. So I think staff are working on that. The town manager, I went and met with some of the residents to make sure that was okay, and then proper drainage was still going that way. I understand that this has not yet been developed. I'm just asking, with this temporary storm pond there, will it help alleviate some of those issues before the main pond is completed?
Your worship, I'm going to ask the manager of planning to take that question.
Directly, I would say no, but indirectly, perhaps. Now, what I mean by that is that the stormwater pond, the interim pond, they will have to do some additional grading and work to make sure that there's a proper outlet for that. Therefore, there should be some refinements or improvements that would mitigate some of those concerns. The other aspect is that the interim pond will need to be managed by the developer during its interim status. So there's a better chance that if there is any concerns that they would be caught through some of that monitoring program.
Okay, so when we walked back behind there, that area where the R8 has been zoned, the dirt is higher than the backyards. And that's why all the water pushes that way. So I'm asking is like, so when we do that interim, that resloping will allow the water to be pulled away from those backyards so it does not sit there anymore.
Your worship, that issue hasn't been directly raised with this proposed plan, though that's something that we will take back as a comment to discuss further with the developer.
Okay, I appreciate that. So when you're having that conversation with the developers that are looking at the temporary storm pond, to ensure that it is taking water away from those residents that actually built that back onto that?
So your worship, for clarity, there is the on-site drainage in the back that is on private property that none of this development will address directly. However, if there's drainage in the back that is presently not functioning as intended, that's stuff that we can, that is an item that we can work with the developer to see if we can better address through some of their grading work and see what we can accomplish.
Okay.
Your worship, if I may, I appreciate the questions that are being raised, and I recall some of this from a few years ago. We can have some conversation administratively and ensure that there's some commentary provided when we come back for second and third reading. And I think, your worship, if I recall too, I don't know, I can't speak to the last year or two, but I know a few years ago when we had some issues out there, some of that was also related. I think at that point in time we were still hauling snow into that area, and that added to some of the drainage challenge. And since then we've stopped doing that. And the other thing too, just again, sort of top of my mind, your worship, and to the rest of the council, there's been other development out there since some of those problems from a few years ago, when there was low areas and high areas, and some of it was just kind of going where it was going. But over the last few years, as the roads have been constructed, so on and so forth, there's a bit more of the drainage is being actively managed, whereas again 3 or 4 years ago, that sort of area was just I would say not actively managed on some of the stormwater as we've been going through the construction phases. So, but we can take a look into that and make sure there's some information provided, or at minimum we're able to verbally speak to that at the second and third reading.
Thank you. Any more questions, comments? Okay, see none. Call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay. 8.2 for the land use amendments. Go ahead, administration.
And so following the previous discussion.
Okay, can we just get
Pardon me.
speak a little closer to the mic? It's just harder to hear back here.
Of course, sorry, Your Worship.
That's better.
Not better. So we're here to discuss first reading as well for Bylaw 2660 LUO 22, which is a land use bylaw amendment which would facilitate, again, the further development of Brickyard, specifically Stage 5. So now we drill down into the land development process, which is the land use bylaw that we're here to talk about today. This more specifically defines the boundaries and land uses for different properties. So the existing districting is shown here in this diagram. There will be areas of R8, R5, and R2, which will be redistricted as follows. So you can see here, most specifically along Brickyard Drive, there was a move to R4 and R5 districting, as well as reverting some of those other areas west to FD, which more accurately describes the areas as they're currently being used, and would allow any future development to come back to council for further stages. So tentatively, this is scheduled for public hearing on June 13th, provided first reading, and we're given blessing to proceed with advertisement. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding, please? Okay. Just a question for administration. Going back to the previous photo. So in terms of the redistricting of the land use, I can see where that's shifting from an R8 to an R4, and then from R2 to R5, and I can understand that. There's also a proposed road connection there. Are those going to be remain the same, or will those be changed in the future as well?
Yeah, that's correct, Your Worship. So following these amendments, there would be a road closure bylaw brought to council to close this little flare out that you see there. Right in the middle of the two R5 blocks, that road would be closed.
Okay. And then my follow-up question, then in terms of that road closure there, then how does that affect the overall functionality and connectivity of the subdivision?
Your Worship, in terms of local roads, no additional concerns from administration regarding the closure of the one road. These are just local roads off of the collector. Originally, there was planned for the 3 as shown here. 2 are plans. Some of the additional information the developer has provided us is kind of a detailed for the rest of the Brickyard, and they've got a sufficient road structure within there that's, again, supported by Brickyard Drive being the major collector that provides most of the through through there. So, no concern.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members of council, any more questions for clear understanding? Okay. See none. Councilor Laurie, for the motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the Town Council give first reading to Bylaw 2660/LUO/22 to amend Land Use Bylaw 2654/LUO/22 and to authorize administration to proceed with newspaper advertising and notification of a public hearing to be held on June 13th, 2022 for Bylaw 2660/LUO/22.
Thank you, Councilor Laurie. Members of council, any questions, comments, and debate on the motion to go to first reading and to have a public hearing? Councilor Meyer?
Thank you, Your Worship. To not, without getting too far ahead, I would just like to express, I think the densification of these lands adjacent to what will be our campus recreation facility is appropriate or appears to fit the bill anyhow for the area. So I'm excited to see where this goes.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Seeing none, I do appreciate the land use coming back for a little change. As members of council, we've heard many times, we try to keep as much high density as possible onto a collected road. So having those shifted closer to the main arterial, which is a lot better than having it into a local road. So I look forward to seeing the public hearing, what the residents have to say. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's carried. Moving to 8.3. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is regarding a first reading of Bylaw 2661, LUO 22, which would facilitate the redistricting and land use bylaw amendment of the land use map for 4601 44 Avenue, also known as the former RCMP detachment. So the stage within the land use planning framework that this would reference is the land use bylaw, which again defines boundaries and land uses for specific sites. So this proposed redistricting would move from a P2 community services district to R8 high density residential district in order to facilitate the development of the RCMP lands. The next steps for this would be to advertise for public hearing, tentatively scheduled for July 11th. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of council, any questions, comments regarding the presentation? Okay, see none. Okay, administration, looking at the report, definitely this is not a kind of, I would not say it's more of a private developer, it's more of a federal development because it's owned by the federal government. And it was based on the CMHC criteria there, which is the federal standards that they have to abide by or meet to do this project. My question is, who ensures that if this does go ahead, who ensures that those criteria are met? Is it the town's responsibility to make sure that it's met?
So it's my understanding that it would be the federal government's responsibility to make sure that they comply with the program and ensure that it is affordable housing. There's a series of qualifications that they have to meet for the proposal, but the responsibility would be on the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation, I believe, CMHC, to ensure that they comply with their proposal requirements.
Okay. Thank you. And then in terms of affordable, as mentioned there, how is that calculated? Is that calculated based on the CMHC Edmonton rate or the actual Stony Plain rate? Because there is a difference.
That's right, Your Worship. I believe it is calculated based on the CMHC rate.
Okay, members of council, any other questions for clear understanding? Councilor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration, it may go beyond administration's ability to answer, but it is a concern that's been brought up for residents in regards to this project. While there's many questions that are asked and answered in the presentation that we've received from the applicant, one question that I don't see asked and answered here is in regards to the eligibility for residency within this project. Several residents have reached out to ask me if this project or if this building, when it's constructed, which again, I know that this is just the land use bylaw side of things, so it's a little bit out of place, but if that building is going to be accessible for everybody.
Your Worship, I can maybe speak to that. So, yeah, and I would go back, the original, I think, question along the lines of responsibility and so on and so forth. As the municipality, again, we're here to deal with land use. It's a pretty straightforward process in some ways, but certainly questions of land use do bring up other questions, community development questions, and so on and so forth. So I would hesitate to try to answer on behalf of the applicant. Certainly, these types of questions we can make sure that they're prompted to either speak to directly during the public hearing process, or be prepared to respond to council along those lines. So I guess I'll leave it at that, Your Worship. That sort of a question, we can make sure they're aware of coming in on July 11th, I believe is the date for this one. So,
okay. Thank you. Deputy Mayor, Councilor Fletcher, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Let me direct this in a little bit different way. I'm going to use R8 opposed to M1, and I understand that we've been asked for an R8 high-density residential district. What is the town's position to be able to alter that from an R8 to an M1 if we see that that was a much better fit for our community?
To Councillor Plechko, if it was, for example, going to it was M1, am I correct? The M1 designation is not supported, say, by the presiding area redevelopment plan, the Old Town Community Plan. It doesn't contemplate industrial uses within the area compared to, this is a highway corridor, if I remember correctly, under the area redevelopment plan, which supports things such as commercial development, apartments, mixed use, and so forth. So this sort of a change from a community services district to a high density residential is supported by the overarching statutory plan, the area redevelopment plan.
Thank you.
Any other questions for clarity and understanding? See none. Deputy Mayor for the motion, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council give first reading to Bylaw 2661 LUO/22 to amend Land Use Bylaw 2654/LUO22 and authorize administration to proceed with newspaper advertising and notification of a public hearing to be held on July 11th, 2022 for Bylaw 2661 LUO/22.
Thank you. Members of council, any debate on the motion? I ask administration to turn to page 149. So, in terms of the criteria outlined by the federal government, that the minimum number of units is 53. Obviously, council has not yet seen the kind of development plan, but from what I read, it doesn't seem like it might not exceed that. And definitely for the area that it's in, again, right on the transit route, on Artillery Road, walkability to a lot of services in the community, is there ability or a conversation to have with the Lakeside Community Association about increasing that density or changing kind of the design? When we look at in terms of the overall area structure plan and what the town wants to achieve in terms of walkability, accessibility, affordability, maybe having 53 units is not appropriate, but having more going up, which is very, very similar to what some of the buildings are around there currently.
Your Worship, there's no limitations that say that there can't be more. Again, with the R8 district, there would be a maximum amount based on parking stalls on site. But again, there is no minimum there's no maximum, I guess, from our standpoint, other than specifically in the regulations. So we would be open to working with them if there was interest in more than that. The proposal they've brought forth is the 53, from what I understand.
Any more questions, comments, debate? Councilor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No questions specifically tonight, just a couple of comments. And similar to Councillor Laurie mentioned earlier tonight, I really appreciate the inclusion of the results of the public consultation that was undertaken by the applicant. I personally found that a number of my questions were asked and answered, and I found that to be very, very helpful. Just a note, and I know this is included in our package, but for the community to be aware that, you know, this initiative is supported by housing strategies at the federal, provincial, and municipal level, and it meets our own housing strategy and the need that we have in our own community. Government of Alberta has suggested that the wait list for affordable housing doubled in the last decade, specifically here in our community. I think the projection is close to 175, 200 units over the next 7 or 8 years. And so this project, if it goes forward, certainly helps meet some of that need. And so I look forward to learning more about it in the coming weeks. I look forward to hearing from the residents of Stony Plain and seeing where this project goes. So just my comments today. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Seeing none. Let's see. The Deputy Mayor has made the motion. I just one question for administration. Nothing really to do with the actual land use bylaw, but in terms of number 2, it says to proceed with newspaper advertising. And I think, I believe a couple of years ago, we had a huge flood of letters and emails from print media because the MGA was changed that no longer do we need to actually advertise in print media. It could be through our website, through social media, etc. So would it not be more relevant if we change that in the future? That would just says, you know, authorize the administration to proceed with advertising as per the MGA of a public hearing.
Your Worship, you know, we can certainly consider that. I think, you know, the writing you see in front of you is probably pretty standard, and we've done that for a while. I know, you know, I mean, we do much more on social media over the last little while. I think even our, I don't know that I've looked at it for a little bit, but as opposed to years ago when there would be massive maps printed in the newspapers and so on, half pagers kind of thing. I think we have scaled that back, I believe, a bit. But yeah, we can give some thought to that. But you know, we still tend to go with, you know, if we can hit the community in a few different ways with some of the stuff, we will generally try to do so. Your Worship, maybe just a further open-ended comment to that, though. We just went through a few different motions to go to public hearings. Council is aware that there is one scheduled for the 27th for a previous land use and ASP change, I believe. You will have noticed this evening we have one set for the 13th and now this one for the 11th, Your Worship. So there's a bit of a different timelines on all of those for how long they're in the public's eye, so to speak. But we were also trying to minimize having you know, significant public hearings all at the same time on the same meeting. So I believe, you know, moving forward, 13th, 27th, 11th, there'll be public hearings for different land use projects. So.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. I highlighted it, but I didn't want to mention it, but definitely better for the applicants and also our residents as well to have public hearings that are not having 3 in one evening, just to have them out so that we allow ample time for our residents to have that conversation with members of council as well. Okay. And I just looked at the communications, for all 3 public hearings. It does say that it's more than just newspaper advertising, so if we can kind of work around those as well. Okay, any more questions, comments on the motion? See none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, that ends our bylaws today. Moving on to number 9, which is business items. And we're back to the Stony Plain Spruce Grove Trail. Go ahead, administration.
Your worship, pardon the pause. I'm just trying to get some through some technical difficulties here. In the meantime, while I wait for my button to load, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our new development project engineer, Kristen Hussey, who's with us here tonight. She will be taking the reins on a lot of the new development that comes through the town, as well as this project. So she's here tonight to see us move it to the next steps. And I just thought I'd take the opportunity to introduce her to council. Your worship and council, I'm very excited to be here tonight to present the progress at the town. Oh, pardon me. To present the progress that the town of Stony Plain and the city of Spruce Grove have made in progressing the trail connections between the 2 communities. As this may be this is not a new item for most members of council, but today I'll be doing a brief recap of previous discussions with council that brought us here today. I'll be doing a brief summary of the work to date, recommendations that have come from the work that has been progressed, and then closing for comments. As many on council will be aware, there are in fact 2 trails within this project. One is being managed directly by the city of Spruce Grove, and the future trail is being designed for future it's preliminary design right now with the town for future construction in 2023 by the town of Stony Plain. In March of 2021, there was a motion made. Pardon me.
Okay. Hey, hold on a second. We're having a hard time hearing back here. If you can turn your mic higher and then speak directly into it so that it actually picks up.
It's a huge buzz back here. You can't hear past the buzz.
Apologies, your worship. Can you hear me? Is this better?
Yes,
okay.
that's a lot better.
Normally, I have to tone down my voice so I don't scream into the microphone, so I apologize. I'll just go back a few steps here. In March of 2021, administration presented to council options for an alignment for the first trail that will be managed by the city of Spruce Grove. To date, and on the picture on your right here, you will see the red section of the approximate trail that's been constructed to date with the yellow dotted lines currently being completed in the future. In 2021, Town Council directed administration to fund up to $150,000 of this trail connection down Boundary Road, and to continue to work with the city of Spruce Grove on a future alignment to further connect the 2 communities. With work to date, approximately 75% of the first trail has been constructed right up to the boundary of the Highway 16A right-of-way. We are working closely with the city of Spruce Grove on updates as this progresses. Additionally, since our last meeting and update, town administration has completed a preliminary engineering report to outline options for the second trail to be constructed. This is just a further update of the trail. This is a picture of it in early last month. As you can see, most of the work has been completed along that side with some work to, like I outlined earlier. Moving on to the preliminary engineering update. So as I stated, we have been working closely with the City of Spruce Grove Administration, Planning and Engineering departments. We have since had our consultant complete the full report, which has been presented to council as part of the package. In the report, it outlined 3 potential options to be considered. The first one, to run parallel with the Highway 16A right-of-way. The second, to follow on the north side of the CN rail. And the third, to follow on the south side of the CN rail right-of-way. Just because just talking about it isn't always a great visual, this is just a overview photo that we developed to outline 2 options. I do apologize for the nomenclature. It should not be option C, it's option 3 for continuity. You can call that a clerical error on the engineering manager's part. In reviewing these options, these 3 options to determine the best recommended path forward, several different parameters were reviewed as part of the report. These include costs, comments from staff, the alignment, the current and planned land use in the areas, transportation, so that is the ability for people to get back and forth on the trails, the natural and physical and built form features, human, sensory, and cultural implications, infrastructure implications, as well as its ability to be implemented. Additionally, the consultant was directed to provide high-level cost estimates to help in determine the best option moving forward, along with those different attributes. With the Highway 16A option being the most cost-effective for the 2 options, of the 3 options, pardon me. As a result of this collaborative effort and the information contained within the preliminary engineering report, administration is recommending to proceed with the alignment 1 along Highway 16A with detailed design to begin this year for future construction to begin in 2023. The motion before council is that the town council accept the trail report for information and direct administration to proceed with detailed design, which is currently within the corporate plan, and with the recommended trail option in 2022. I would now welcome any questions from council.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Members of council, any questions of clarity and understanding? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I'll refer to page 182, and I imagine this is just a type error, unless we've got a new highway along the corridor that we have here. It says 15A. Is that supposed to mean 16A as part of the report?
Your Worship, I'm presently in my full screen, so I don't have the report in front of me. Is that in the lead sheet, or is that?
That's on page 182 of 305.
305.
Your Worship, I can see it in front of me. I'm pretty sure that's a typo, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can I make a comment? Just an overall comment. I'm quite excited to see this. I've probably read through this report 3 times this weekend just to look at the different things. On a regular daily basis, I see people walking up and down this highway commuting to get to Spruce Grove. While I appreciate the trail that we have that takes them the long way into town, I think this is a trail system that is long overdue. And I think we have 3 great options in front of us. And unless somebody sitting at this table can convince me otherwise, I think 16A, the main A trail, is probably the least expensive and the quickest to achieve based on all the sampling and soils that have been done along that way. So I'm quite excited to hear comments from my fellow councillors in regards to where we take a trail that's going to really connect our communities together.
Okay, any more questions for clarity and understanding to administration? Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very quickly, page 197. I think I know the answer to this question, but just for clarity, 2 options are laid out for option A and A1. And I think the difference there is 1 encroaches on the highway right-of-way, may be needed to move at a different date depending on what Alberta Transportation decides, where A1 would be outside of that. When we're talking about a detailed design, is that still to be determined? Or when we're saying A, are we saying option A of the 2 options?
I beg your pardon, Your Worship, I'm just pulling that figure up.
So page 197 here.
Your worship, through Councilor Anderson, you're referring to the cross-section that's labeled as Section A, is that correct?
Yeah, and I believe the explanation in the package was just where the highway right-of-way is and the possibility of having to remove that at our cost at a later date. If we went with the path closer to the highway, so option A, and A1 was just offset that extra 5 meters so that it was not within that right-of-way.
Your worship, through Councilor Anderson, you're correct. These would be details that would be further fleshed out in detailed design. This is more just to give a overall cross-section, and we would have to, the final cross-section would be some form of these two once we got done, as there are implications where parts of the trail will come close to a wetland and others will not be close to the wetland. So some details of this will be worked out at that stage.
Perfect, thank you. And I think, I mean, without saying, we'd obviously like to build a trail that does not have to be moved in the future. And I know that's something that's taken under consideration, so thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilor Lowry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll echo Councillor Palechko's comments. I know I was a huge supporter when the original connecting trail came forward, that this was the preferred route that made the most logical sense for use. Based on what we were already seeing, although very supportive of the trail that's currently under construction, I'm very excited to see this come forward. You know, when you think of some of the existing trails in other areas of the province, the likes of the links between Canmore and Banff, and you see how that runs along the highway and how effective that is for active transportation and alternative modes of transportation. I think it's very important that, you know, we see this trail for what it is, and it is opening up those options and those abilities for people. I do have a question, though. There was some great stakeholder engagement done, very positive responses from everything from CN to the RCMP to developers, etc. But there's one quite negative response, and it starts on page 267. And I believe this is the adjacent landowners. And I'll take a direct quote out of page 268. And it says, the first thing we'd like to note is that the highway side option is not on the table for us, as it makes no sense for us as landowners in terms of considerations of future commercial development on the north half. So I'm a little concerned when we talk timelines, wanting to obviously have detailed design completed this year and want to have construction in 2023, if we have a landowner that this trail may traverse that is not in agreement with what we're moving forward with. And I'm curious if you can provide maybe a little bit more context around what impact this landowner may or may not be able to have on this project, and how we plan on mitigating that.
Your Worship, through the Councillor Lowry, yes, the public engagement was quite exhaustive, and I appreciate you bringing that comment forward. This particular landowner, if I remember correctly, and I apologize, it was a year ago, but if it's the one I'm thinking of, they're the landowner on the north side of 16A, that within the city of Spruce Grove, which is why we were contemplating this trail to be on the south. One of the reasons we were looking at the south side. Okay. To avoid this particular issue. One of the issues that I don't believe is fully captured in this comment is concerns with accesses and the future accesses into the development. There was also, in the very early stages of discussion, there was talk about the trail going straight through the lands as opposed to being in the 16A. So there was a lot of information to work through. That said, we wanted to capture these comments and bring it forward.
Okay, and I'm just going to cycle back a little bit on this because my understanding was it was the previous trail design.
Correct.
That was originally intended. And looking at the dates on this is September 13th to 28th of 2021, which would have been after that trail was already agreed upon and I believe even under construction. So I'm just, again, I'm a little confused on this engagement and how this fits into the options that are being proposed. I guess the simplest question is this landowner affected by option A that is being presented and is being proposed as the most desirable option? And if they are, what potential roadblocks could this put into meeting the timelines we've put forward?
Your worship, through the council, Lori, apologies for the for the extra information or miscommunication of the information there. To answer your first question, so this current option does not affect that landowner. The second one, to give context to my comment there, when the same landowner was engaged by the city of Spruce Grove prior in the previous one, which I was just trying to lend some additional context to some of the discussions that I've been going back and forth with in the first trail.
Okay.
So in this particular instance, this trail alignment does not affect that landowner.
So then, was this landowner confused when these options were presented to them? Because it seems like this landowner is very adamant that this is going to impact. They're talking everything about easements and workspace requirements, and so I'm guessing a lot of these points that were raised by the landowner then were moot because they are on the north side, not the south side, which is where this trail is proposed. Therefore, all of these questions have no bearing on this project.
Your worship, through the council, Lord, that's correct.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Okay, I don't know where to go with that, because looking at the land, who owns the land through one of those slides that is in a package, the south side is the Dresden land. And I believe that's what Councilor Laurie is referring to, is that it is the Dresden land. So it does have this impact. So I'm not too sure where administration is saying that it has no impact.
Your worship, I'm happy to take this question back for clarity, so I can get to a better answer for council.
Okay. If you can mark that and have that for us, please.
Mm-hmm.
Members of council, any other questions for clarity and understanding? Okay. Question is, I believe this is a joint project between the City of Spruce Grove and Stony and Plain. When is Spruce Grove looking at approving a motion that's similar to this?
Yeah, Your Worship, I believe it's in front of Spruce Grove Council this evening. Is that the question you were asking? Yeah, they would, again, if council will recall, this is generally a joint project, so to speak. And I believe they have the similar report and similar recommendation in front of them this evening.
Okay. Thank you. And just I echo the comments of members of council. It's very good to see all the three options coming through. That was part of the conversations. And this fits our timing really well. I think when council discussed having that connection, 16A was a viable option, but it did not meet the timelines. And for us to be able to put two trails through within the next 3 years, this was part of the best step forward, going north on Boundary Road North first, and then looking at east-west connector. The question regarding the location, do we need provincial approval to have the trail along 16A?
Your worship, we would have to engage with Alberta Transportation. Half of the trail would be within City of Spruce Grove right of way, so we would be working directly with them. Alberta Transportation would have to be engaged, which is why we would like to move the detailed design this summer to make sure we have enough time to engage with them and work with them on this project.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Going back to comments on the Dresden land, the Dresden land is on the south side of the highway, correct? So that is where the trail proposal is. When I look at the maps that we have sitting in front of us, everything is on the south side of the road. So I think the question would be back to administration is, with that developer, have we moved the trail far enough away from his land that it has no effect to what he's doing? Or are we still trying to be able to deal with the Dresden land?
Your Worship, I can maybe provide a few comments along those lines. So I think, just to maybe have a bit of a dialogue here on this one, but I think there has to be a bit of a difference between, is there a direct actual impact or is there a perceived impact? It's my understanding that this trail will be located within the highway right-of-way and not on private lands, I believe. So, the question is there a direct impact? The answer is no, it's not on their land. They were engaged as a stakeholder, as an adjacent landowner, as we typically do, and I'm sure the City of Spruce Grove does as well. If you go through the package, the commentary in there, the questions being asked there are, those are perceived impacts, in my opinion, Your Worship, and through the rest of council. And the majority of them are not ones that can't be worked around, related to construction and so on and so forth. Your Worship, through to the rest of council respectively, anytime we do a public utility construction, there are those sorts of impacts, lay down yards and equipment moving around and so on and so forth. Your Worship, if I may, we engage with the public to understand what their concerns are and thoughts are, but we take those into consideration and generally, especially on construction, act in the public good. And, I believe that's what's been laid out here. So I'll stop there, Your Worship. Those are some general sort of comment on the dialogue earlier with council. So.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I do appreciate that, CEO. I think it's important that we have that discussion, and I think this is year 5 that we've heard talks about something happening in that piece of property that seems to continually be a hindrance to the development of that area. So it's nice to see that we have an option that will still connect our communities that does not have to deal or address a subdivision or something along them ways. So you're right, at times there can be always a impact to somebody someplace that somebody doesn't like, and unfortunately for the betterment of our public and our residents in both communities, sometimes we have to take a look at what's best for them. So thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions for clarity and understanding? Okay, I'll just go back to the page that was highlighted by Councillor Anderson, 197, in terms of kind of the proposed design along 16A. And I noticed that there is no barriers between 16A traffic and the proposed pathway. I think Councillor Laurie mentioned the path connection between Canmore, and there is a Jersey barrier there that prevents any vehicles from coming over. How are we going to ensure the safety that if a car seems to lose control or hit something, there's a medical emergency, that it protects the residents, pedestrians that are using that?
Through Your Worship, absolutely. The safety is paramount with these pieces of infrastructure. Without getting too technical into pedestrian separation from vehicle traffic, typically these facilities, if there's enough setback from the actual road right of way, you don't always require a barrier. In this case, the intention would be to put it far enough back, setback from the roadway, so there would be adequate distance away from the facility. That would be reviewed at detailed design to confirm if a barrier would be required. It is a function of the total vehicles on the road, the speed, as well as the setback distance of the pedestrian facility to the roadway facility. So as we go through detailed design, those considerations of a barrier is required along the entire stretch or parts of stretches that might be too close to the road. Those will be considered at detailed design.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions for administration? Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and just I don't necessarily know whether it's clarity or not, but in going through the detailed information, there is a barrier rail included in the cost estimates and included in some of the drawings. So for example, on page 286, where it's going through the cost estimate for McElhaney, you have line 1.05 barrier rail, 927 units at 1 meter per unit. And then also down a little bit further in the wetland areas in area 2.06, so another 470 meters. So there's approximately 1,300 to 1,400 meters of barrier rail included in the cost estimate. So, and sorry, Councillor, you had I don't know what page that was. Page 197 as well. There's a cross section drawing which also identifies the barrier fence from Highway 16A. So there's the 10-meter clearance, and then the barrier fence, existing ground line, 3-meter trail option A, or that little bit further with the additional 5-meter easement for trail option A1. So the barrier rail is identified, or the barrier fence is identified in both of those.
Yes, I can appreciate that. Now, I'm trying to get to the question about barrier fence is what we currently see on Highway 16A now, or would it be a little more aesthetically pleasing with Jersey barriers and stuff than having that barrier fence? But you guys will be working with the Board of Transportation to see what's best?
Through your worship, I guess through your worship and Councilor Laurie, yes, those are things that we'd be working through with Alberta Transportation and in line with all safety guidelines that are required.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for clear understanding? Councilor Loynes, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification, this proposed plan for this trail, is it for pedestrians only? Are we talking cyclists as well, or what was the intent, knowing that they don't always share the right-of-ways?
Your worship, through the Councilor Loynes, it is a multi-use trail, so there would be intention for bike users and walkers, joggers, regular pedestrian users that you'd expect on town trails.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just add on to that because I had my next question is in terms of a linkage between our two communities. We have a lot of members of our community that use scooters. In terms of usage, I know some trails limit the use of powered scooters on them. Is this going to be one of those trails, or is it accessible that seniors or people that have mobility issues to be able to use their scooters?
Your worship, yeah, I think the basic idea, when we consider multi-use, we would expect anything short of licensed highway vehicles are welcome to move their way up and down. So, Your worship, I would expect, just like you see around our community as it is now, some of the scooters being used and bikes and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for clarity, understanding? Councilor Pechko?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we've heard reference a couple of times to the Banff Kenmore Connection. That connection has multiple use. If you watch it, you see the bikers riding up and down it. You watch the little scooters going back and forth, and you watch multiple people walking on it, and you watch people pushing baby carriages and all kinds of things there. That road, right along a highway, it's not barriered all the way. There is portions, as you referenced to, there is portions of that are barriered and portions not. So it is a very linkable trail for both communities that allow anybody that has mobility or non-mobility issues to be able to move freely between the two communities. So maybe it's something that when we're doing it, I'm sure with the report that I read, you've given consideration to just about everything that we could possibly see in a trail that could link these two communities. And again, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. And another question for administration, as 16A trail connection is the proposed trail linkage for the second trail, and I think it's good. And in terms of safety for residents, what processes do we have as a community to advocate to have that the speed on that road reduced? As we continue to see the build up there, we've heard about the first linkage which will cross Veterans Boulevard into Bound Road North. There is going to be some intersection improvements there as well. Looking at the safety of our residents, if you go halfway down to the corporate limits of City Spruce Grove, it is 60 there. But if you go west of those corporate limits within town Stony and Plain, which is owned and operated by the provincial government, it's 80 there. In terms of safety, if we're going to have kind of promote healthy livings, more connectivity, walkable communities, I think speed will have a factor on that. So how do we, in terms of the council or administration, walk through those process of requesting that reduced?
Yeah, Your Worship. Again, generally agree with the summary you just provided. So, the speed changes as you come through the west, whether municipal boundary aside. So the other thing that does change to a degree is the built environment around that. So if you are, as everybody in the room knows, if you're in the city of Spruce Grove, there's more access points, there's right-ins, there's right-outs, there's all of that sort of thing. As you kind of move west past Veterans Boulevard, there's less of that. So what would generally be the case moving forward as the area develops, as access points are added, as trail connections are added, as that land develops out a bit further, you would look at examining the speed limits through that area. Direct question as to who does that? Well, within the Stony Plain municipal boundary at this point in time, it's Alberta Transportation. They are the road authority on 16A. Any changes of speed limit has to be either, call it what you want, requested or directed to them. And they, I'm sure, have their own set of standards about speed changes and so on. There has been some, I would say, conversation with AT over the years about that. But I don't know that there's been any formal request for a speed change provided to AT on behalf of or from the town of Stony Plain.
Okay. I appreciate that, and definitely I hope, I'm not sure exactly how the Highway 16A strategy is going, but hopefully that's also being considered there as part of the strategy too, as we continue to have the full build out. That's just more information and data for us to go to the province with if we ever choose to advocate for a reduction in speed limits there. All right, any more questions for clarity, understanding? Okay, see none. That's all I had as well, so let's move on. Councillor Meyer for the motion, please.
Yes, thank you. That town council the town council accept the trail report for information and direct administration to proceed with detailed design for the recommended option in 2022 as included in the corporate plan.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Any debate on the motion that's on the floor? Okay, see none. On behalf of council and our residents from both communities, thank you very much for this report. I think this was a hot topic when we talked about it a couple years ago when we approved the first trail connection. I'm very happy that the second trail connection came as recommended because we know the other two, option B and C, or 2 and 3, definitely does have merit, but it's just not ready to be built out yet. And definitely with the town of Stony Plain, we have the it's called Edgeland. Yeah, I think it's East Edgeland development that will be residential on the south side of the tracks. And with the City Spruce Grove Shiloh residential development on their south side of the tracks will actually provide that natural linkage in the future. So looking forward to having many trails that connect our two communities together. Okay. I'll call the question all in favor. Okay, and that's carried. Thank you. Moving on to information items and council discussion. We'll start with Councillor Anderson. Do you have anything to report or share with council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just something to report, I guess, and then some comments. But Councillor Laurie brought up a concern from some residents related to construction debris at the west end of Silverstone Drive here a while back, and has continued to be an issue. I've driven down that way. We've had residents in that area, one in particular, come out with punctured tire, having driven to the end there. I used our website, which works famously, to submit a request. Got a call from Bylaw. I know there's been conversation there, but something I think we need to stay on top of as we move more into our construction season here, that those areas do need to be kept up, and that it's residents in those areas that are affected by the construction debris that's left. And so an observation. And then kind of had a proud resident moment here over the last few weeks. And I say that in relation to some of the community events that have been hosted and put on by our staff. We had Celebrate Downtown, the reopening there, had a great turnout of families, which was amazing to see despite the weather. We had our fire department out with Fill the Boot for muscular dystrophy outside of Co-op, which will continue here over the next couple of weeks. We had our Mental Health Awareness Week. We had our large item pickup and the community garage sale, if you will. But just lots going on, and it's so great to see the community out and about and engaged in those activities. And then with that, we had a chance to see the Kinsmen with the opening of one of our community signs and had a conversation with them about Farmers Days coming up. And they're so thrilled to be able to host Farmers Days again, which is coming up here the 3rd through the 5th. And so just an open invitation to the community. We'd love to see you all out there. I know we're excited, Mayor and Council, to serve you breakfast Saturday morning, but just another great event to bring the community together.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Two questions through you to administration. First is in regards to our street sweeping. Normally, we would have a schedule released by now in regards to when the different communities throughout the town were going to have the street sweeping completed. I know we had heard previously from the General Manager of Planning and Infrastructure that the activities were ongoing and that a schedule would be released, but it still is not up on the website, and we still don't have indications as to when the different subdivisions can expect that to occur.
Okay. Does the administration have any commentary?
Your Worship, through Councillor Laurie, I'll have to circle back on that. I apologize for not having an answer ready. I'll have to reach out to our Public Works, our infrastructure assets group and get a clarification for you.
Okay. And can we get it before the end of the week, please?
Excellent, thank you. And if that can be published and distributed on our social media channels on our website as normal for our street sweeping and our street clearing, that would be appreciated by the residents. Second is just a question in regards to the outdoor pool. Obviously, we've heard through our general manager that we have some repairs that had to happen to the outdoor pool, which has unfortunately delayed the opening. And I'm just wondering if we have an update on the opening, as well as if we have an update on when council can expect more information back to be presented to council in respect to the options of potentially covering the pool and whether that type of work may prevent some of this type of damage in the future.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie, so two questions there. I'll go with the outdoor pool opening as the number one question. Yeah, so the ambient temperature didn't permit the repair to dry as quickly as we had hoped. So on Saturday it was still tacky, and even Sunday morning it was a bit tacky still. So in order to continue with the integrity of that repair, we had to delay the filling. So staff are working, longer hours to try and expedite that schedule delay. I would say to you safely, I'm going to tell you Friday, and if we deliver in advance of Friday, then that's awesome. But we have to heat treat and get a positive test result back from Alberta Health Services before we're permitted to put the public in the pool. Typically, our water tests go in on a Tuesday. We are working with Alberta Health Services. They understand the situation, so they're pretty much on standby to come by and have a look at the pool. And usually, they're able to give us a bit of a on-site okay while we're waiting for the test results. So if they see enough that they're happy with, then typically we get that on-site okay. That's happened a couple years in a row for us, so we're pretty happy about that. With respect to the options to cover the pool, so work is progressing with that, and we did communicate to council that would be coming in Q2. If we do choose to cover the pool, obviously, and we're functioning the pool through the winter months, then generally speaking, we're probably not going to have a lot of the repairs that we've had the last 2 years with the freeze thaw, because we just eliminate that overall process. That being said, pool basins typically require repair from time to time, even if they're indoor and heated and running through 12 months of the year, as we see an annual shutdown at the TLC pool in September. So pool basins typically are something that have to be done on a cycle. And I would suggest to you that, that 5 to 7 years, depending on the surface that you're using.
Thank you. And just, one tack on to that as well. Appreciate the answers. In relation to the opening of the spray park, do we have any indication on that?
Yeah. Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie, June 1st is the targeted date for the splash park, and we have no reason to believe that will move.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Councillor Loynes?
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to administration. It's been brought to my attention on more than one occasion that there's a lot of near-miss accidents happening on the Golf Course Road heading south and the Fairway Drive, as the left lane is straight through or to turn east, and the right lane is to turn west towards, oh my goodness, sorry.
It's only west.
And people, anyways, the road slipped my mind, I apologize. But people constantly get into that right lane and go straight, and there's a lot of near miss accidents there. Is there something town can do to ask our RCMP or somebody to go there and watch that intersection for more safety? Or is there a way that we are able to protect our residents from that? More people are driving, nicer weather tends to bring out more erratic drivers.
Your worship, through the council lines, certainly we can put it on the CPO's radar. We typically have general statements that we put on their dashboards, and we can target that area a little bit more. As Inspector Locken reported the last time he was in Chambers, there's a new position in town that our CPOs are working closely with, and definitely this is something that we can bring up and we can target. Yes, on occasion I have seen people, and sometimes I think it's just they're not aware of it. It's a 2-lane, and it abruptly ends at that intersection, but there is a merge lane beyond. So it's also used nicely when people are turning left, and they'll go to the right-hand lane, and they'll go around, and they'll merge back into Golf Course Road when it goes from a 2 to a 1 lane. So there have been some opportunities where people are taking advantage of the situation, and there have been others where they're using it correctly. So certainly we can put that to the attention of our enforcement team and monitor that.
Thank you very much. No, that's it for me.
Thank you. Councillor Meyer?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'll just take the opportunity to echo my fellow Councillor Anderson's comments regarding the Main Street grand opening. That was a really nice event, and it highlighted a lot of work that we've accomplished over the last number of years. So good job, administration. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank you, Mayor Choi, for inviting me along to ceremonial sweat lodge. It was a great opportunity to immerse ourselves in the rich cultural traditions that many Indigenous residents of Stony Plain share. So thank you for that. And then just one question regarding the green utility boxes around town. I'm just curious, because I see some of them we have wrapped with some type of picture. Some of those pictures are getting a little faded. As well, I also noticed some of the barriers around those green utilities are getting a little rusty. So I'm just curious if that's our responsibility or how we go about making sure those stay nice.
Your Worship, thanks for the question. It's one that's often asked, both I think the public and so on. So again, without being very specific on which site or whatever, but generally speaking, most of those are not the responsibility of the town of Stony Plain, whether it's maintenance or upkeep and so on and so forth. Specifically on the ones that are wrapped, those I believe are 99% Fortis boxes. There was a program, it's going back a number of years ago, where they started installing those throughout communities. I will note, we have some of our own. We wanted to have our murals represented and some stuff specifically about Stony Plain. So we do have some that are more specific for our community that are out there. I believe I have something scheduled with our Fortis rep in the reasonably near future. I can certainly find out where they're at with, call what you want, the redo of those or what their timelines are. I can find that out and get that back to council, although that would probably be at least, a few weeks from now. It wouldn't be right away. And I guess the third thing I'll say along those lines with the utility boxes, probably the best advice I can give council is if you know of specific ones, we can, in a certain area, even if it's just a relative block area, if you forward those into us, we can send those over to who we believe to be the utility company that's has ownership of them, and press them to have them repaired or replaced and so on. Having said that, Your Worship, again, I'll just be clear with council because this has been an ongoing thing for a while. We are at the, I don't want to say, you know, those things get replaced at the pleasure of the utility companies or reviewed at the pleasure of the utility companies. We have pushed them at different points over the years. Sometimes that works and they get done fairly fast. Sometimes, frankly, it doesn't, and it sits half open or cracked open or what have you for quite some time. And we get those questions from the public as well. Again, we can pass them along. You can contact the utility provider directly with a concern or with a question. The challenge is it's hard to tell who's what or whose is whose. That's the general confusion I hear from the public. They don't know whose it is. Is it TELUS? Is it Shaw? Is it whomever? Your Worship, I'll just stop there, see if I answered the questions or if there's anything further I can add.
Just to repeat back, so take my specific concerns and bring them to the town.
Yeah, Your Worship, again, this is an ongoing thing. We do hear a lot about these things and we do send them over, and from time to time we get cranky with the utility providers about it. But it's been an ongoing thing for quite some time. So yeah, if you have the area, the location, general location, send that into us, we can make sure it gets to the utility provider.
Perfect, thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I think it's tonight has been a great way for all of council to share some of the things that have gone in community. I think one of the things that we forget to share is the partnerships that we have with our other communities and them coming out to our events. I think it's important that we acknowledge them from time to time as well, because they are truly part of the tri-region. We talk about it as a tri-region, but sometimes we forget to involve our partners. So the City of Spruce Grove, the County of Parkland, and the other one that we tend to forget from time to time is the Chamber of Commerce. There was fairly a good number of people that come out to the downtown opening that the Chamber was there representing, and sometimes we forget that they are part of our business community and help to make this community go forward. So a special thank you to all of them that attended that evening. And you know, I heard great things from some of the residents walking around. They even made comment about one of the mayors walking up and down the street. So next time he comes, maybe we should just pass on to him that things are better in Stony Plain so he can wear a flagship for our town. Thanks.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Good. That's answered. I'll just have to tag on to Councillor Meyer's comments. You know, and the town managers mentioned that from time to time, it's been an ongoing issue with the utility providers within our community to maintain and upkeep the utility boxes, especially if they're vandalized, broken, etc., and maybe even a safety hazard. I've researched and talked to other communities. They do have something built into their community standards bylaw, which we have, that allows them to enforce or fine the utility companies until it gets done. Very much similar to that, we have the same ability to fine members of our community that do not shovel their walkways, do not upkeep the grass cutting, mowing. They're issued a ticket. They get X number of days, I think it's a couple of weeks to get it done. If not, if I recall our bylaw, we can go ahead and then have that done ourselves, contract it out, and then charge back 1.15% of it, so 150% of what it costs us to have that repaired. We've been talking about this for many years now, as the town manager said, and I'm actually getting tired of this, and so is the residents within our community. So how do we direct administration to bring back a community standards bylaw update to allow our administration to follow those steps to ensure that they're done in a timely way? If not, we will contract it out and have it done ourselves, and then issue a ticket or citation back for those costs at 1.5% higher than what our cost is.
Your Worship, something like that would require a motion of council to do so. Yeah, a motion of council to direct something that's specific.
Okay. So I'll ask right now, can we bring something back to the next council meeting?
Sorry, Your Worship, like right to the very next council meeting and like June 13th? Frankly, no. We got a fair amount of things going on. That would take some research and some time to prepare a bylaw, so on and so forth. So I would say the answer is no to the June 13th.
Okay, I think we had a misunderstanding there because I asked you what we can do, and you said that you'll need a direction of council to do something like that. So I'm just asking for a motion to come back to council for us to direct administration to do that work. It's not to bring it back for the next meeting. It is to bring back a motion so that council can approve it, because that's not part of our corporate plan, to then ask administration to do that work, and then they can come back whenever they want with it once it's done.
Your worship, I see the general manager wants to jump in on this, so I'll turn that to him for now.
Your worship, a couple comments, and then I'll start with the community standards bylaws being reviewed right now, so we can certainly include that as part of our review when we bring it forward. So that would be in the fall that would come forward, because it's a lengthy document, a lot of sections that we have to look at and ensure that we're still doing things as they need to be done, and the legislative review that has to be looked at in terms of the reference back to several different acts and pieces of legislation are covered off. So we can certainly include that as part of our work if council wishes. The secondary comment to that would be, I'm not sure what contractor would look at a TELUS box or a Fortis box and have the confidence in touching their infrastructure without, and I would assume we'd probably have to do a legal, provide a legal question or get a legal question answered related to that, because certainly it's a specialized piece of infrastructure, and if we do hire a contractor who's legally liable if it creates a catastrophic failure of that particular piece of infrastructure for a particular subdivision or section of the community, because it's not just TELUS, it's not just the Shaw cable network, it's a lot of utilities that are responsible for these particular pieces of equipment. And I think that, we would certainly have to look at that legal aspect, because we would be the one that would be commissioning the work on behalf of the contractor. So we would probably hold full liability related to any failure that they may cause of that infrastructure. So certainly we can look at it, and whether or not it becomes part of the bylaw, that could be part of our research, and we can provide that information back to council when we bring the community standards bylaw update back for commentary from council.
Okay, thank you. So with that mentioned by the general manager that the community standards bylaw is getting reviewed and maybe brought back to council in the fall of 2022, then does administration still require a motion from council to review that as part of the overall community standards bylaw?
I would, I guess just generally speaking, Your Worship, if council appreciates and understands the update just provided by the general manager, I think we would just go with that without a motion. And it would be in the chambers in the fall, I believe I heard, so.
Yes. Okay, I'm okay with that commentary from the general manager. Members of council, okay? Or do we like to do as in motion? Okay? Okay, we're okay with that. Okay, and that's it. Thank you, and that's all I have for my comments and stuff. Again, definitely a great job for members of our staff for downtown grand opening. It was good to see so many members out as well. And I'd like to echo some of the comments made by Councillor Anderson in terms of community pride. As being a member of the Town of Stony Plain for 42 years and watching this community grow and kind of expand and see that. One thing that I've noticed that has not changed in my 42 years is the community spirit of the Town of Stony Plain. And I think that goes well with the members of previous councils, administration, and our community that continue to show up, volunteer, and get involved in the community. So definitely kudos to our staff, to our community, and to the councils before us to make sure that that small town feel is ingrained and stays within our community, no matter how large we grow. Okay. And with that, before I adjourn, again, it is game day. We're wearing Oilers colors because we're close to Edmonton. In terms of what was one of the best things for our economic recovery, as we talk about coming out of an economic downturn for the last 2 years ago and then through the pandemic, Battle of Alberta is that #1 driver that will boost the Alberta economy. So we're looking forward to it. And to those that are watching that are not Oilers fans, sorry. Let's go Oilers! We're adjourned. Thank you.